Saudi Arabia is wagering $1 trillion on a radical economic transformation. But the clock is ticking on its oil-dependent future. The world around it is changing fast, and the kingdom needs to adapt. China is making big investments in local projects, while the US is roiling markets and causing chaos. Can Saudi Arabia use new and old friendships to stay on top? In 2016, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman unveiled Vision 2030, a breathtakingly ambitious blueprint to transform Saudi Arabia from an oil kingdom to a global investment hub. Yet, a decade later, the reality is not quite there. The strategy aimed to modernize society and build new industries within the country. The starting point was to diversify away from being a petrostate. A key step was the IPO of Saudi Aramco, the state-owned oil company, which raised $25 billion by selling just 1.5% of the company's shares. The company did $121 billion in profit on $440 billion of revenue in 2023, more than most countries earn in a single year. But its investors aren't going to be happy if oil prices stay low. RBC estimates that Aramco requires $77 oil to sustain its dividend to investors. As a result, the stock is approaching COVID-era lows. That means less money to invest in real estate around the kingdom's Vision 2030 mega projects. The crown jewel is NEOM, a futuristic megacity. The line, NEOM's standout feature, is a massive linear city designed to house 9 million people in a car-free, eco-friendly setting. But the mega project's budget has skyrocketed, while timelines for construction to be completed keep getting pushed back. And experts continue to question, is it even possible to build such a huge city in the desert given the water scarcity? Saudi Arabia only has about 90 cubic meters of water available per person each year, which is way below the 500 cubic meter threshold for extreme scarcity. To deal with this, Saudi Arabia has gone all in on desalination, making over 300 million cubic meters of fresh water from seawater every day. But this fix uses a ton of energy, burns a ton of oil, and emits a bunch of greenhouse gases. So by trying to get more water, Saudi Arabia is actually countering some of their other green initiatives within Vision 2030. The Middle East is also getting hotter, which will make water more scarce and hurt farming. This is bad news for Saudi Arabia's food supply, since they already import 80% of what they eat. Saudi Arabia's geography doesn't help either. Most of the land is desert, with less than 2% good for growing crops. Despite these hurdles, Saudi Arabia is pushing ahead with tech projects. They plan to spend $40 billion on artificial intelligence to become an AI leader and attract big tech firms. The Saudi Public Investment Fund, which has almost $1 trillion, is funding projects in robotics, smart cities, AI, and clean energy. The PIF wants to grow to $3 trillion by 2030, but this is proving difficult. The government is trying to seed startups, but this isn't Silicon Valley. And they need these efforts to work to create jobs, especially for young people. Over 60% of Saudis are under 30, which stresses the immediate economic future. Currently, there's a big problem with unemployment, especially for college graduates. Many young Saudis can't find jobs, even with degrees, showing a gap between what they learn and what employers actually need. The entire country is racing against time with this economic shift. If 60% of Vision 2030's programs work, it will be a huge step forward. But if only 20 to 30% are realized, the Saudi government's financial picture will enter shaky ground. To try and backstop their investment risk, the Saudis have invited their biggest oil customer, China, to become a major investor in Vision 2030 projects. This is a big deal. But have you noticed how certain news stories seem to disappear from your search results? Big tech's algorithms aren't just tracking you. They're determining what information you're allowed to see. I recently stopped using Google and switched to a search engine that has completely transformed how I research videos for this channel. Let me show you what happens when I search for Saudi human rights issues. What's fascinating is that the results immediately show perspectives from across the political spectrum. You get coverage from multiple viewpoints, giving you the complete picture without hiding stories that don't fit the right narrative. I particularly appreciate how they clearly indicate the political leaning of each publication. This transparency helps you understand the context of information while still accessing diverse viewpoints, which is essential for anyone trying to understand complex geopolitical situations. They also just launched search results enhanced with podcasts. By incorporating playable podcast snippets, it gives you more than just news results. You're also getting honest conversations from voices on both sides of the aisle. If you search US Senate, you can see how powerful this tool is. The premium version eliminates intrusive tracking and targeted ads, while their special tools help you navigate media bias from multiple independent monitoring organizations. Go download the FreeSpoke app and subscribe by scanning the QR code or going to the link freespoke.com/Watson and get 25% off FreeSpoke Premium by using my promo code Watson25. Under the auspices of its Belt and Road Initiative, China has helped finance the Jiaxing Industrial City development, partnerships in NEOM, renewable energy projects like solar power plants, and investments in Saudi Arabia's mining sector. The Saudis hope that these investments will bring the two countries even closer together. But it is unlikely that China can replace the United States as the Saudis' security guarantor. While the PLA is huge and has undergone the world's largest military buildup since World War II, the Middle East is its third or fourth priority. China has to worry about internal security, Taiwan, and its immediate neighbors. So who else could protect the Saudis? Japan is also more focused on matters in Asia and is sourcing more and more energy from the United States. Turkey's interests aren't necessarily aligned with the Saudis, evidenced by their partnership with Qatar. India is still a decade away from the military might it would need to project power into the Middle East. And Europe just doesn't buy that much Saudi oil. They're more in need of natural gas. That leaves Israel. The Abraham Accords, the normalization of relations between the Saudis and the Israelis, was all about this reality. The kingdom's primary adversary is Iran. So the enemy of their enemy, Israel, can be a friend. The Israelis can share intelligence and help with operating American weapon systems, but they cannot secure the Persian Gulf. That remains one of the world's most dangerous flashpoints. And if the fuse ignites, it might be up to just the Saudis to put it out. The foundation of Saudi Arabia's economic and geopolitical power is its oil wealth. The kingdom controls a quarter of the world's proven oil reserves, and that oil is the easiest on the planet to extract from the ground. Saudi Arabia's production costs are estimated to be between $2 and $10 per barrel. For comparison, Russia's costs $15. Norway's offshore oil costs $25, and US shale is around $40. So the Saudi government has used that margin to pay for big infrastructure projects, social programs, and investments abroad. It's the key tool in the kingdom's foreign policy, giving it influence worldwide. But its economy is far less diversified than most other countries. The Saudi national budget depends on oil for over 60% of all government revenue. As a result, the Saudi government's fiscal break-even price, where the government's annual budget is balanced, is much higher. It's at least $70 and likely closer to $100 a barrel. That means that for the last few years, the Saudis have been running a deficit, and the President of the United States wants the price of oil to keep dropping.
And I'm also going to ask Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the cost of oil. You got to bring it down.
At the end of 2024, the Saudi debt to GDP ratio was 30%, While this might not seem high compared to other countries, it's worrying for the kingdom. Due to its reliance on a single commodity for the majority of its income, that amount of debt represents a considerable amount of risk. For comparison, Saudi Arabia's sovereign debt is rated A+ by both S&P and Fitch's credit ratings, the same as Japan or China. Yet China's debt to GDP is around 90%, if you don't count local governments, and Japan's is over 200%. Now, China and Japan's economies are also much larger, but the point stands, they have far more financial wiggle room than the Saudis do, even though they import a lot of oil from the Middle East. The Saudis need that demand to continue. Any recession that reduced demand for energy would hit the kingdom hard. Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman has been working to try and diversify his country's economy, but that has been expensive and the results aren't showing up yet. And there's a new development that's making this economic equation even more dangerous. OPEC, the cartel that the Saudis are the de facto leaders of. 65 years ago, the Saudis organized and led an oil cartel called OPEC. And for decades, they were successful at controlling the supply of oil, driving the price upward. But recently, the US shale revolution has fundamentally altered this reality in ways that Saudi Arabia can't counteract. And OPEC's power to control global oil prices is waning dramatically. American shale producers have transformed the US into the world's largest hydrocarbon producer and flooded the market with co-products like natural gas and natural gas liquids. These resources effectively put a ceiling on how high oil prices can go, as they serve similar functions at much lower costs. The evidence of this shift came earlier this year when OPEC Plus unexpectedly announced production increases, sending oil prices tumbling below $70 a barrel, right after President Trump declared his intention to push for $50 oil. This wasn't coincidence, but capitulation. Even Saudi Arabia, with all its production advantages, can no longer manipulate global markets as it once did. And for a country whose economic transformation depends on oil staying above $70 per barrel, this represents an existential threat to Vision 2030 and the kingdom's ambitious plans. As the real cost of energy trends downward and alternative energy sources gain ground, Saudi Arabia's time to diversify its economy is running out faster than anticipated. And just as things get dangerous, its protector is stepping back from the region. The United States and Saudi Arabia have been close allies for decades, but their relationship is changing. The US is pulling back from the Middle East to focus more on Asia and countering China, while also dealing with war fatigue at home. This leaves Saudi Arabia in a tough spot. Saudi leaders worry that a lighter US presence will encourage Iran and others to cause trouble in the region. The US is also way less dependent on Saudi oil. As America imports less oil, there's less economic reason to stay close allies. These changes are creating a power vacuum in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia's military budget shows its desire to be a regional powerhouse. With a projected $78 billion budget in 2025, it ranks 5th globally in defense spending, outranking many established powers. But this massive investment raises a question. Why isn't the Saudi military more effective? Despite all this money, Saudi armed forces are often seen as weak, even called a paper tiger. This reputation is enough to make their situation dangerous, but the reality behind it compounds things even worse. For the last decade, Saudi forces have struggled to achieve decisive military objectives in Yemen, despite facing the less equipped Houthi rebels. The conflict has stretched on for years without a clear military victory. In September of 2023, Saudi Arabia's vulnerability was laid bare when Houthi rebels, fighters operating on a shoestring budget compared to the kingdom's vast resources, successfully breached their American-supplied missile defenses and struck critical oil facilities in Jeddah. The attack sent global oil prices surging 4% overnight. What good is having the world's fifth largest defense budget if you can't protect your most important economic infrastructure from insurgents armed with crude weapons? There are a few reasons for this poor execution. It starts with the kingdom's heavy reliance on foreign military contractors and advisors for maintenance and operations of advanced systems. An enormous part of the budget is spent on buying advanced weapons, but those various systems come from different countries, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and China, which creates interoperability issues. This means they need a lot of consultation, management, and advice from people who are not fiercely loyal to Saudi Arabia. To try and counteract this, the existing command structure has historically prioritized loyalty over merit. These weaknesses matter more as the region becomes more unstable. When Saudi Arabia struggles to show military strength, it hurts its influence and ability to deter enemies. Across the Persian Gulf, Iran is desperately looking for a win. After losing the majority of Hezbollah leadership to Israeli attacks and the ousting of Bashar al-Assad in Lebanon, Iran is approaching something called death ground.
A useful concept comes from the Samuel Griffiths translation of Sun Tzu, which talks about death ground. What's death ground? It's when your enemy puts you on death ground, which means they're going to kill you. And therefore, you have no choice but to fight. Because if you don't fight, you're dead. And even if you fight, your odds are poor, but at least that's the only way you're going to get out.
Death ground is being backed into a corner. It's like burning the boats, but the boats have been burned by your enemy. So far, Iranian aggression towards Saudi Arabia has been limited to the expensive proxy war in Yemen, with Iran backing the Houthi rebels and Saudi Arabia supporting the government. But the Strait of Hormuz, where a lot of the world's oil passes through, make this rivalry globally important. Any problems with oil shipments could have big effects on the world economy. This is an extremely dangerous scenario for the Saudis. They look far weaker than Israel, and they're lacking a major security guarantor. Even with all its oil money and willingness to invest in defense, the kingdom cannot seem to spend its way out of this problem. This is the man who will have to figure it out. When it comes to security, he needs closer ties with China without creating problems with Western allies. Within the region, he needs to align with Israel without causing backlash from the Arab world. Saudi Arabia's control of Islam's holiest sites, Mecca and Medina, add another layer to this balancing act. This religious authority has historically given the kingdom significant soft power. However, its religious leadership is increasingly challenged by Iran's competing vision of Islam and by younger Saudis' desire for more moderate interpretations. When MBS hosts international DJs and boxing matches, he's not just entertaining tourists. He's risking backlash from religious conservatives who see these events as undermining the kingdom's Islamic identity. So where does this leave Saudi Arabia? A kingdom caught between ambition and reality. Vision 2030 is a bold gamble to transform an oil-dependent state into a diversified economic powerhouse. But the odds are stacking up against its success. With oil prices facing downward pressure from structural market changes, security challenges mounting across the Persian Gulf, and America's protective umbrella folding, Saudi Arabia faces its most precarious position in decades. The question isn't just whether Saudi Arabia can win the 2030s, but whether it can navigate the fundamental shifts reshaping the Middle East before the economic clock runs out. And for MBS, the coming years will determine if his vision can overcome these obstacles, or if the Saudi Arabian trillion-dollar transformation was just a mirage in the desert.